I remember the exact phase of my life when everything around me looked normal, yet nothing inside me felt normal anymore. My husband and I still lived under the same roof, still shared responsibilities, and still followed the routine that had kept us together for years, but the closeness was gone. It wasn't a sudden disappearance. It faded slowly, quietly, until I realized I had stopped looking for moments between us because there were none left. He spent his days buried in work, his evenings scrolling through his phone, and his nights sleeping before I even finished brushing my hair. I wasn't angry. I was tired of feeling unseen. During that time, Amir and Sana came into my life through a mutual friend. They were married, close in age, and had a warmth about them that instantly softened any room they entered. They weren't overly friendly, not the type to push themselves into someone's comfort zone. Yet somehow, without trying, they stepped into mine. The first few conversations were harmless, simple compliments, small observations, shared jokes. But even then, something about their attention settled deeper than it should have. Whenever they spoke to me, their focus didn't drift. They didn't half listen. They didn't nod absent-mindedly. They looked at me as if my words mattered, as if they genuinely wanted to know me, not just the polite version people show in gatherings. I didn't realize how long it had been since someone listened to me like that. I felt myself leaning into their presence more than I intended to. Over time, I started noticing subtle things. The way Amir's eyes followed my expressions instead of my words, as if he could hear the emotions I didn't speak. The way Sana remembered small details about my day, even ones I mentioned in passing. Their warmth wasn't casual. It was intentional. Not obvious enough to call out, but present enough to feel. I tried to dismiss the feeling as coincidence, but every interaction made it harder to one gathering. I caught them exchanging a brief look, something quiet, something shared, right after I laughed at one of their comments. It was a look I couldn't decode, but I felt its weight. For the first time, I wondered if they were seeing me differently than I believed. And more unsettling than that was the realization that I didn't step back. I stayed. I kept talking. I let myself be seen. That night, they invited me over for tea. A simple message. A harmless plan. Yet the tone of it made my heart beat a little faster. I sensed an unspoken layer beneath the invitation. Something neither of them had said outright but both had been hinting at without words. And what surprised me most was that I didn't want to refuse. I didn't want to pretend I didn't feel what I felt. I told myself it was just tea, just conversation, just company. But the truth was simpler and far more dangerous. I missed being wanted. And for the first time in years, two people made me feel exactly that. The night I followed my instinct didn't feel dramatic. There was no shaking, no tears, just a quiet certainty settling in my chest like a truth that had waited too long. He said he was working late again, voice steady, tone casual, but his eyes flickered in a way I'd never seen before, like a person rehearsing honesty rather than speaking it. I didn't argue. I didn't question. I simply nodded, kissed his cheek, and let him walk out the door unaware that something inside me had finally stepped awake. I waited a few minutes before leaving. Not out of fear, but out of a strange sense of control, as if patience gave me ownership of the moment. The city felt different that night, too loud and too quiet at the same time. Every car headlight felt like a possibility, every turn a revelation waiting to unfold. I wasn't looking for heartbreak, I was looking for truth. The kind that destroys illusions but frees you from pretending. I didn't have to look long. His car was parked in a place that had no connection to work, no business offices, no deadlines to justify it. A small cafe glowed across the street, windows warm, laughter spilling out softly into the night. I stood far enough not to be seen, close enough to understand. Through the glass, I saw him leaning forward, smiling in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in months. And sitting across from him was someone else. A woman. Familiar only in the way her presence filled the space where mine used to fit. They weren't touching, not yet, but the intimacy was unmistakable. The kind of closeness that doesn't need physical proof to be real. He watched her with a softness he no longer gave me. She tilted her head toward him, laughing, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. It was ordinary, painfully ordinary, and that made it worse. Affairs aren't always fire and chaos. Sometimes they're gentle, tender, built quietly in the spaces love leaves behind that I expected anger. But what came instead was a strange calm. Betrayal unfolded in front of me like a story I somehow already knew the ending to. I didn't rush inside, didn't confront them, didn't demand explanations. I just watched, observed, memorized every detail because this moment mattered. Not as destruction, but as understanding. The truth no longer hid behind suspicion. It was visible, breathing, alive. I left before they saw me. The drive home was silent, heavy, but not in the way I imagined heartbreak would feel. It wasn't the scream of loss, it was the whisper of clarity. I finally knew. And knowing gave me power I hadn't felt in a long time. I spent that night awake, not out of pain but out of thought. If he had chosen someone else, what would I choose? Would I leave, confront, break everything in one burst of fury? Or would I do something far more unexpected? Something even I didn't yet have words for. By sunrise, the answer formed quietly inside me that I wouldn't expose him, that I would watch, that I would learn. And I would help him think I never knew. The morning after that conversation, I moved through the house with an unsettled calm. The kind that comes after crossing a quiet boundary you didn't intend to cross but can't take back. Nothing had technically happened. Yet the air around me felt different, charged with awareness I hadn't felt in years. I kept replaying his words, the way he looked at me, the gentleness in his voice when he admitted he cared more than he should. It wasn't something I could dismiss. It lingered like a soft echo under every thought. My husband returned late the night before, too tired to notice anything unusual. Or maybe he simply wasn't looking. I watched him move around me with the same distracted routine, and for the first time the absence of his attention felt louder than ever. I wanted to tell myself that what I felt for Daniel, whatever it was, came from loneliness, not from him. But deep down I knew that wasn't the full truth. It wasn't just that Daniel noticed me. It was that I noticed him back. A few days passed before I saw him again. I wasn't expecting him, but when the doorbell rang and I opened it to find him standing there, rain dusted across his jacket, something inside me tightened. He said he came to return a book my husband had lent him, but the way his eyes searched mine told me that wasn't the only reason. I stepped aside and let him in, unsure whether it was the right thing to do, but unable to stop myself. He looked around the house as if testing the distance between us. I offered him a place to sit. He hesitated before accepting, as though sitting too close might say something he wasn't ready to say. I sat across from him, but even that felt too close for the amount of unspoken truth between us. He asked how I'd been, voice low and careful. I told him I'd been thinking, and he nodded as if he already knew. He said he hadn't been able to stop thinking either. There was no hesitation, no attempt to hide it. He said he felt guilty for putting me in a difficult position, yet he couldn't pretend nothing had shifted between us. His honesty disarmed me. I told him I didn't blame him. I told him the shift didn't come from him alone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with everything we weren't saying. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fingers intertwined tightly, as if holding himself back. He admitted that he had cared for me quietly for years, long before he ever let himself acknowledge it. He said it wasn't intentional. It was something that grew in the spaces my husband never filled. Hearing that should have frightened me. Instead, it felt like someone had finally spoken a truth I had sensed but never dared to name. I told him he didn't imagine the distance in my marriage. I said it plainly without trying to soften it. The words felt like stepping across an invisible line. He looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before, hope mixed with restraint. He didn't move toward me. He didn't reach out. But he didn't hide the longing either. When I placed my hand on the edge of the table, his eyes followed the movement before meeting mine again. Slowly, carefully, he placed his hand close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from it but not touching me. It was a question without words. That I didn't pull away, that I didn't close the gap either. But by allowing our hands to hover just close enough to tremble from the tension, I gave him an answer neither of us admitted aloud. And then my phone rang. My husband's name lit up the screen. The sound cut through the moment like a blade, reminding me exactly what line I was standing on. I answered with a steadiness that didn't match the chaos inside me. When the call ended, I set the phone down slowly. Unable to look at Daniel, he stood up first, clearing his throat softly. He apologized, not for what he felt but for complicating my life. I told him he hadn't forced anything. The truth was already there. He nodded, eyes darker with understanding, and said he would give me space. When he left, he didn't look back. But the moment he walked out, I realized space wouldn't be enough to undo what had just happened. Nothing could. The day I chose to confront him didn't arrive with rage or trembling hands. It came quietly, like every truth that has waited long enough. After weeks of silence, observation, and deliberate allowance, I finally felt ready, not to destroy him, but to end the version of myself that accepted less than honesty. I sat with him at the table we'd eaten countless dinners at, the place where laughter once lived and where silence had slowly replaced it. He looked comfortable, unaware. That mattered most. I wanted him to meet truth without preparation, without the safety of controlled words. That I started by saying his name the way I used to, gently, almost lovingly. His eyes softened, expecting warmth, maybe affection, maybe the same old comfort he assumed would always be here waiting. But then I told him I knew. Not dramatically, not with tears, just a simple sentence that didn't need decoration. I know about her. His expression shifted so fast I could hear the moment denial died in his throat. Every late night, every whispered call, every message he hid. It was all suddenly exposed under a light he didn't expect to stand in. He tried to speak, but I continued. Calm. Precise. I told him I knew where they met, how often, which lies he repeated most. I told him how long I had watched, listened, allowed. The shock in his face was almost silent, but I felt it like thunder under the floorboards. It wasn't just that I knew, it was that I had known for so long. He realized he had been trusted not because he deserved it, but because I wanted him unguarded. And the weight of that truth hit him harder than accusation ever could. There was no yelling, no begging, just two people sitting in the aftermath of choices he thought were invisible. His regret didn't come instantly. It came in waves, confusion first, then guilt, then fear. He asked why I didn't confront him earlier, why I let him continue, why I helped when I could have stopped it. I looked at him and answered honestly, because I needed to understand what we had become, because I needed the truth to be undeniable, because knowing gave me power I never had when I trusted blindly. For the first time, he saw me fully, not as the woman he believed wouldn't notice, but as someone capable of silence sharp enough to cut. He reached for apologies, but words felt too small to repair what had already changed inside both of us. You can't stitch trust back into place once it frays. You can only decide what to do with the pieces. I told him I didn't help to save the relationship. I helped so I could leave it without wondering what might have been hidden in the shadows. The ending wasn't dramatic. We didn't scream. We didn't break furniture or shatter memories. We simply sat there, two people with the truth between us like a door already open. He lost something that night and so did I, but not in the same way. He lost the comfort of secrets. I lost the version of myself who accepted not knowing. When I finally walked away, I didn't look back. Love had faded long before that moment. What remained was clarity, the kind you earn through pain, patience, and silence stronger than confrontation. And if there's one thing this story taught me, it's that betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise from it does. I didn't catch him by accident, I caught him because I stopped closing my eyes.